gentlemen, grab a chair. Come on in. Students, if you want to grab a chair, go right ahead. We've got a few more people drifting in. A very nice crowd. How do you like this beautiful classroom that someone built about a year ago? It took a lot of pressure for me to go see Dean Adair and let me borrow it for a couple of hours. But it's a great classroom. I think it was built by the federal government for the Health and Social Services College, which is attached to it. But this classroom has all the accoutrements. You see all the gadgets around here and everything else. And it's a great place to lecture. And I was just talking about the acoustics, but I think it's great acoustics in here. But this thing is being taped. And so when we get to the question and answer, please come up, and we're going to use these microphones so that we can also hear the questions, and then we'll have it on tape when that time comes. All right? My name is Gary Carruthers. I'm the Dean of the College of the Business at New Mexico State University, the Yale of the Yuccas. And we are delighted for the second year to have the Wells Fargo team back again to talk to you about the national economy. Now, they have not done well in the last year with the national economy, but I'm sure Dr. Lehman will tell us it's going to be improved over time. But we do hold Wells Fargo accountable for the national economy. And that's why this is such a popular conference, because he comes around and does it. Now, I will tell you that they've been doing this, I think, in Albuquerque for a number of years. And I've read about it. I have not attended it up there. And we got a call from Berna Holtzman, and she said, you know, we would like to come down to Las Cruces and do a conference here. And so last year was our first conference in Las Cruces, well attended, and we have returning the two economists who talked to us last time, and I think you'll find it a really great conference. Now, we hope this collaboration lasts for a long time. All of us are interested in the economy. All of us worry about the economy from time to time. And as a consequence, we think it's quite a community service to offer this in conjunction with Wells Fargo, particularly for our community members. So I want to thank the community members for coming out and joining us for this session. We'd like for our students to come out as well. You'll see a number of students here. Those handsome students with the shirts that look just like that are the ambassadors for the College of Business, and we're so proud of our ambassadors. They always help us with these kinds of occasions. Now, I've told you about the mics, and would you move the mics up the side there, just about a third of the way up there on each side? Would you move that one up there just that way? Thank you. And we'll turn those on when it comes time to Q&A. And what we'll do is both speakers will speak, and then we'll have Q&A, and you all can prepare yourself to ask these two fine economists any questions you want to. I wanted to introduce, I'm going to take the liberty, being the one that has the microphone at the moment, to introduce my favorite economics professor of all time, Dr. Jim Nordike, who's back here. Dr. Jim Nordike. I was so delighted to see him when I was a young pup going to school here. I took a couple of classes from Dr. Nordike and considered him to this day the finest economist that I've run into as a teacher. Did a wonderful job. And occasionally we get to get him to come back out on the campus. So we're going to get started. I'm going to turn it over to Berna Holtzman. Berna is the Community Banking District Manager for Wells Fargo Southwest New Mexico market. She began her career with Wells Fargo in 1994. During her service, she's been a branch manager, market support consultant, consumer loan project manager, and sales development consultant. And we're happy to know and work with Berna, and she's a tremendous asset not only to community, but she's one of our closest friends in the College of Business. She serves on the Business Advisor Council for the College of Business, and a wonderful person to work with. Would you please welcome Berna Holtzman to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Dean Carruthers, and welcome everybody. It's exciting to be here. You know, Wells Fargo has been doing this for about 8 years in the Albuquerque market area. And they came and said, what about Las Cruces? With Las Cruces being a city and the city growing so quickly in New Mexico, we said yes, we wanted to do it here. The purpose of today's event is actually to not only devote time, but to give information to you all so that you can understand not only economy in the United States, but also in New Mexico specifically. Recent history and current states and future paths of all of the economies are going to provide you with hopefully some real good information today. It's going to help you to plan for the coming year. I am honored to introduce to you Eugenio Alemán, Director and Senior Economist with Wells Fargo. Dr. Alemán forecasts national, regional, and international economic trends. His primary focus is in the U.S., including interest rates, but he also does a lot with Texas economy. He is also an expert in economies in Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. Dr. Alemán joined Wells Fargo as a senior economist in 2005, but before doing that, he was a general manager for a restaurant that's actually in Puerto Rico. He was the professor of economics and the director of the MBA program at the Inter-America University of Puerto Rico and worked for a petroleum industry. He has also been an adjunct professor at economics at Drexel University in Philadelphia since 1999. This is Dr. Alemán's second time, and we're really excited to have him. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Eugenio Alemán.
Good afternoon, how are you? How are you? I'm the messenger. I am bringing the good news. You want to hear it? You want to hear them?
Yeah. So we are close. It works. We are closer to a recovery today
Than what we were yesterday. Okay, 1, 2, 3. 1. You hear me? Yes? Okay, so let me see if I can work this out. Where is it? Here it is. So, the U.S. economy, no fiscal cliff, but not out of the woods yet. Actually, we went over the fiscal cliff because we approved no going into the fiscal cliff on the 2nd of January. But the 1st of January was a holiday, so technically we went over the cliff. But because politicians are like accountants, they managed to put everything under the rug. We actually didn't go over the cliff. But, you know, I normally don't start my presentations with the fiscal scenario of the U.S., but I wanted to do it today, and I don't have too much time, so let me show you something. This is federal government outlays. This is growth, percentage growth on a 12-month moving average. So you can see since the 1960s, so, you know, can you tell which years we have a Republican administration and a Democratic administration? Can we tell? Okay, so this is where we went, outlays as a percentage of nominal GDP. Yes, we went up to 25%, but we are coming down. Yes? And this was not the Obama administration's own fault, correct? Because when he started office, this was already almost at 24% of GDP. So, of course, everybody blames Obama today because we have very short memory. But look at this. This is federal government receipts. So this is the amount of money that we take, that the government takes. So it's not only that we have spent a lot of money to prevent a depression, it is true also that receipts have plummeted. Correct? So it is very, very difficult. Have plummeted because we have decreased taxes, and it has plummeted because of the recession. So it is not true that we have spent our way, yeah, we have spent ourselves to almost to death. But for a good cause, I think, just to prevent the depression. But anyway, look at this. This is the federal deficit since the 1960s. So here's where I lose my Republicans, the Republican audience. I lose it here. Tell me where is a Republican administration here? Fiscal conservatives, where are they? Where? This is a fiscal surplus. You know when? Clinton administration, which I call the best Republican administration in the history of the US. And then I call the Bush administration the worst Democratic administration in the history of the US. So when Mr. Bush left, we were here. So we went from a surplus of almost $300 billion to a deficit of almost $800 billion. The change, the absolute change, is $1.1 trillion. It wasn't Obama who, again, I am going to be accused of being a Democrat now. But anyway, let me give you my definition of the US political system. We have two political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. Both like to spend like crazy. There is no difference. Some want to spend for wars, some for social services, but both like to spend like crazy. The biggest difference is that Republicans don't want to pay taxes. Period. Democrats want Republicans to pay taxes. Here's where I lose my democratic audience. But look, things were bad, but we are getting there. Things are improving, the economy is improving, even though the media says that we are not improving. But, the economy has been growing at about 1.5% to 2% over the last several years, which is half the rates that we've grown during the previous decades. But we went through the worst recession since the Great Depression. The first quarter of 2009, the economy dropped by almost 10%. This is 10% of a $15 trillion economy. So it's not peanuts. It's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. And the difference between this recession and the 1920s, during the Depression, is that at that time, in 1929, the US government didn't do anything. We stayed put because the economy was supposed to come back. It never did. We spent 15, 20 years in depression. When did we get out of depression?
World War II.
Why? Because we spent ourselves to death. Yes? We went from, 30, 40% of debt as a percent of GDP to 125%. We're approaching 100% today. That doesn't mean that I say that we should go to 125% of GDP, but we have been able to prevent another depression. And it is costly, very, very costly. The fourth quarter of 2012, the economy dropped by 0.1%. But that is not true. If you look at all the underlying numbers, the important numbers, consumer demand increased, consumer expenditures increased, business investment increased. The biggest issue here is that the government dropped, they upped the ante before the elections, they spent a lot of money, and then during the last quarter of the year, they dropped back. Government expenditures in defense dropped by almost 33%. The lowest government expenditures in defense since 1972. So that took away 1.3% of growth, plus another 1.3% of growth from the accumulation of inventories. Okay, so the economy, this number is going to be revised upwards, a little bit on the positive side. And we are still thinking that we are going to have 1.5% to 2% growth during 2013. Very, very similar to 2012. Let me show you. This is employment, or the lack thereof. Employment dropped by 9 million jobs during the recession. It takes the economy to recover those jobs almost 5 years. We have recovered almost 6.5 million jobs since then. And the reason why we have not recovered 7.5 million jobs of the 9 million is because the US government, or local and state governments, have are still suffering the consequences of the recession. So U.S. employment has increased by about 160,000 per month since October of 2010. We have recovered 6.5 million jobs. We are still behind, but we are on the mend. The U.S. economy is healing. You know, almost every sector is healing. If you do an across sector from top, the most important sectors, which are transportation, trade, and utilities, growing. The second most important sector, government, declining. I mean, even if you are a Republican, the government is an important sector of employment, creating employment. And since that sector is not growing, then this is what is happening. Everything else has posted positive growth. Let me show you. This is a pie chart of every sector creating employment, with the exception of agriculture. Of course, this is non-farm, correct? So 29% trade, transportation, and leisure. And utilities. 15% government, education and health services, 14%. So you would say, okay, so it is the federal government which is very large and it spends a lot of money in giving out jobs. Yes? That is not the case. Out of all government employment, only 13% is federal. And almost all of them live in Washington, D.C. With the exception of the military, of course. Yeah. State governments, 23% of all employment. Local governments, 64%. 87% of all employment is not federal employment. They make a lot of noise because they are concentrated in Washington, D.C., but there are not that many. Yes. So it is not the federal government who employs the majority of workers, it's local and state governments. These are your policemen, these are your firefighters, these are your teachers. This is the biggest issue that we have today. This is one of the biggest issues in the labor market. Let me show you something. This is the unemployment rate. It goes back to when I was born, 1961. Yes. Not that anybody cares, but I just wanted to show you some other recessions. So every time there's a shaded area, it's a recession, and you can see how the unemployment rate skyrockets every time there's a recession. So we went to 10%, and now we are down to 7.9%. By the way, you know that in September the unemployment rate was 8.2%, and no president has been re-elected with an unemployment higher than 8%. So October's unemployment rate was 7.9%. And then Jack Welch, the ex-CEO of GE, started saying that it was a lie, that they fixed the number. You know, if you really know how they cooked that number, it's very, very difficult to mess with that number. What it was clear is that the government was spending a lot more money during the third quarter of last year, when the economy grew by 3.5%. So that pushed employment higher, and that helped to bring down the unemployment rate. But my biggest issue here is this. Look, and nobody talks about it. I don't drive to work in Charlotte. I take the bus. I go to my park and ride and take the bus. I am a very happy camper. And everybody, I am reading my articles in my iPad, my newspapers, and I hear people commenting and talking to each other. Everybody knows each other. I don't know anybody because I am very new in Charlotte, but the only thing that they talk about is when are they going to retire? 2 months, 3 months, a year and a half. The properties that they have in Miami, in Florida, in Arizona, even the driver seems to be retiring very, very soon. So I said, in 2 years' time, I'll be the only one driving in that bus. And I will probably have to drive myself because the driver is dropping out. So this is the biggest issue today. We have an economy that is having issues hiring workers. Why? Because the estimate is that 10,000 people are dropping out of the labor force because of baby boomers are starting to retire per day. So those that are retiring have experience, and some have college degrees. Those that are coming into the labor force have no experience. Some of them have college degrees. And those are the ones that are being hired. If you do not have a college degree, it is very, very difficult. Look at this. 3.7% unemployment rate for college degree graduates. This is more than a full employment unemployment rate. This means if you want a job, you have a job. Of course, you might have to go to North Dakota to get the job. But you might have to have an engineering degree, and on top of that, you might have to have a petroleum and natural gas engineering degree. So the conditions are not easy. But I don't know, yesterday there was an article in the New York Times where saying that firms are no longer hiring high school graduate students. They're only hiring, even for male person, they're hiring people with college degrees. They say that is because of their commitment to work, because they not only want a paycheck, but they want to succeed. I mean, studying 4 years to go and deliver mail is not the best thing that you can look for, but everybody sees it as an entry point, and then start progressing from there. But let me show you this. This is one of the reasons why the unemployment rate is going down, because of the labor force participation rate. This is where the dropping of the baby boomers out of the labor force is affecting the labor market. And it's making their firms to have, workers to be very, very difficult to hire. The mean duration of unemployment had remained 40 weeks plus during the last 2 years. In January, it dropped back down to 35 weeks, which is very good. If this continues, that means that those workers that have been having issues getting back a job are having more luck in getting jobs. But this is the first time since we collect this number that this measure is so large. So this is a big issue. One of the issues is that people cannot move from state to state because they cannot sell their homes. So they are stuck with their homes. They cannot sell their homes. They cannot go to North Dakota. Even if you want to go to North Dakota, you cannot go to North Dakota. So this is the biggest issue. Those who are retiring have experience in education. Those that are coming up have no experience whatsoever. Some of them have education. So those are the ones that are being picked. At some point in time, this has to start pushing salaries higher for everybody. We are very, very close to see wage push inflation at some point in time. If this continues, of course. If it doesn't, then we will not see that. But this is very, very telling of what is happening in the labor market. Inflation, no inflation either. Before the recession, we had relatively high inflation of almost 6%, then we went to a deflation. Then the Federal Reserve came up with quantitative easing 1, just to create inflation. Inflation accelerated. Then the Greek crisis started back in March of 2010. Inflation started to slow down. Then the Federal Reserve came back with QE2, quantitative easing 2. Inflation started to accelerate again. Then the Chinese economy started to slow down. The emerging markets started to slow down. Inflation started to slow down again. The Federal Reserve, what does the Federal Reserve do? Comes in again, QE3. This time, their commitment is to keep on printing money until infinity. Thank God they didn't say and beyond. But at least until the unemployment rate drops below 6.5%. But that could take 2 years more. So they have said, we are going to keep interest rates low until at least the first half of 2015. So interest rates are going to remain low for at least first half of 2015. So I don't know, for those of you who were in my presentation last year, I have likened the US economy to Humpty Dumpty. So here's Humpty Dumpty. Remember the lines for Humpty Dumpty? Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty. All the king's horses could not put Humpty together. Okay, so I changed those lines. And I say, the US economy sat on the wall. The US economy had a great fall. All the king's treasurymen and all the king's Federal Reserve men could not put the US economy together. Why do I say this? I say this because we have been walking on top of this brick wall for more than 13 years. Back in the early part of the century, I don't know if you remember, but I was living in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And I remember that I paid 79 cents for a gallon of gasoline. Late 1990, 1999, early 2000. Remember what had happened at that time? 98, we had the East Asian financial crisis, collapse. Then we had the Russian default in 98 and 99. Then we had the Brazilian devaluation. Commodity prices were at an all-time low. There were fears that the world economy was going directly into a depression, deflationary spiral. And what does economics recommend there? If you think that you are going to fall to this side of the wall and face a depression, well, we just print money. Yes? This is what is called the helicopter effect, yes, in monetary theory. Which says that if central bankers think that an economy is going to go into a depression, we should get out, central bankers should get into helicopters and start throwing money out of the window, just to reflate the economy, yes? So this is what we have been doing for the last 13 years. So my biggest concern is that we are going to probably fall at some point in time to this side of it, which is stagnation and inflation. This is what we went through during the 1970s and 80s, stagflation. So, you know that the chairman of the Federal Reserve, his nickname is Helicopter Ben, yes? So I went to the internet to try to get a helicopter, and this is what I got. Come on. I didn't make this up. It was done. Right? This is the Ben Bernanke action figure. It says, now you can drop money out of a helicopter, but it says, warning, cannot really prevent a severe recession. This is what we have been doing for more than 13 years. And this is what we are going to continue to do until at least first half of 2015. Just print money. How does it look like? Well, we went from 6.5% for the federal funds rate, which is the target rate, used to be the target rate for money supply, to 1%. We stayed there for 1 year. Then we figured out that we had a bubble in the housing market, and we started increasing interest rates. The bubble bursts. What do? We do go down to 0 to 0.25%. We have been there for more than 3 years. We're expected to be there until at least first half of 2015. Let me show you another picture of this. This is a different picture, but an added picture, which is what is called QE to the end. So this is the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. Sometimes, and this is a purchase of mortgage-backed securities. Sometimes, you know, I am Hispanic. You know that I have an accent, no?
No.
You know why I know that I have a thick accent? Because when I sneeze, people ask me, where are you from? That's having an accent. So this is the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. Sometimes people ask me, are you sure that this is the correct spelling of that word? Yes, it's balance sheet. So we have been purchasing everything for the last 5 years, 6 years already. From US Treasuries to mortgage-backed securities, and now QE3 says that we are going to purchase almost $85 billion per month, and we are doing that. You can see that the purchases of instruments have increased, started to increase again, per month, until at least the unemployment rate drops below 6.5%. So we should expect these balance sheets to continue to increase to $3.5 trillion. So this is my biggest concern. Of course, inflation is nowhere to be found today. But my biggest concern is that we have never done this before. And the consequences of this are, I think that nobody understands. Nobody has a clue what's going to happen. So that's why I call this a potential monetary tsunami. Let me talk to you about the housing market. I have become kind of an expert of on the housing market because that's the only thing that I talk about. But I have never really put out an explanation of why the housing market was in the shape that it was. Until 2 years ago, I received an email and with what I thought was the best explanation. So I wanted to share it. So here it is. This is your house as seen by you. This is your house as seen by your buyer. This is your house as seen by your lender. This is your house as seen by your appraiser. And this is your house as seen by your county tax assessor. You know, when I was studying my doctorate, my PhD in economics, my microeconomics professor used to say, look, in order to have a market, you need a buyer and a seller. They agree on a price, and you have an intersection between the supply and the demand curve. That is a market. That is what we call a market. But that doesn't happen in the housing market because 2/3 of all the housing market depends on mortgages. So even though you accept a price for your home, you go to the bank goes to the appraiser, the appraiser says, no, that is not the correct price, the price is lower, so there's no transaction. And this is what is happening to 2/3 of the housing market. So what is pushing the housing market up today? Cash purchases. Investors are buying everything. The Chinese are invading California. Yes? The Canadians are invading Arizona. Only the British Canadians, because the French Canadians go to Miami. They are more Latino type. And in Arizona, you don't know, there are some issues with Latinos, so they just want to go to Arizona. But anyway, the Mexicans are invading Texas again. And the Venezuelans and the Brazilians are invading Miami, together with the French Canadians, right? So this is what is happening. The cash market, the cash purchase market is booming. That is putting pressure on home prices and on inventories. And this is what is moving the housing market again. And let me tell you, the housing market is one of the best sectors today in the economy. Everywhere I go, the only complaint that I get from real estate brokers is that there are no homes for sale. So remember the shadow inventory? I don't know if you have heard about it. Everybody has been talking about the shadow inventory that is going to take over the country. There is no shadow inventory. There is no shadow. There are no homes for sale. That is what is happening. There are no homes for sale, and that is pushing prices higher. Housing starts higher, existing homes, funding home sales higher, even prices higher. This is what the Federal Reserve wants, home prices to be higher. There are some analysts that are saying that we are in another bubble today. How long do I take? How long do I, how much time? 10 more minutes? Well, let me show you this. This is existing home sales. This is normal. So today, they're 1 million higher than what is normal. So for those of people that are saying that we might be in another bubble today, they have some reason to believe that we might be creating another bubble, the next bubble, for keeping interest rates down so low for so long. So anyway, I think that we still have some way to go before a bubble. But you know what happens to economists, no? You know when economists know that there's a bubble? When it bursts. It's not that, I mean, it's not our issue. You know, demand collapses, so there's a bubble. Had demand not collapsed, there wasn't have not been a bubble, but demand collapsed, so there's a bubble. So we know a bubble after it happens. But this is what the Federal Reserve wants, to see home prices higher. And you see, just now we are starting to see a pickup in mortgage lending. Very, very tame, very, very small, but now we are seeing some progress in mortgage lending. Of course, the unemployment rate is still too high. People don't have down payments. They are saving money for down payments. They prefer to rent today. This used to be the worst graph that I had. This is negative equity by state. So, of course, Nevada tops the chart with 58.6% of all mortgages underwater. Florida, 42.7%. Arizona, 39.7%. You know, but it's no longer the worst graph that I have, because this is much improved. Last year, Nevada had 70% of all mortgages underwater. So that means that even in Nevada, home prices are going up. Arizona's number was 50% last year. So you can see that already we are seeing home prices going up and mortgage negative equity to improve across the country. So the good news is that the economy is recovering, is healing, and we are going to continue to grow. Manufacturing index was 53.1 in January. Very weak, but any number above 50 means expansion. So above 50 means expansion, so we are expanding slowly, but expanding. Let me show you this. This has nothing to do with what I have been talking about, but I always get the question at the end of my presentations. They say, Dr. Hahnemann, I know why the economy is not doing great. Because we are no longer a manufacturing country. And that is not true. And this is why. This is manufacturing output. And this is manufacturing employment. So, we are still the largest manufacturing producer of the world. China is very, very close behind us. Very close, and let me tell you, they will beat out the crap out of us. Because there are 2 billion people. There's no way around it. What is true is that we no longer use workers to produce manufacturing goods. We use machines. So the difference between this line and this line is called productivity. This is why our manufacturing workers earn so much money compared to the Chinese workers. Somebody was writing the other day, I don't know whether I should buy a Ford that is made in Hermosillo, Mexico, or a Toyota that is made in South Carolina. It's a difficult decision. If I buy a Ford, the money goes to the Mexican workers and the American management. If I go for the Toyota, the money goes to the American worker and to the Toyota Japanese management. It's not an easy decision, but this is the world we live in. It is not that serious of a problem. We are still the largest manufacturing country in the world. Service sector continues to grow unabated. Again, any number above 50 means expansion. The service sector is expanding. I know this looks really fishy, but this is credit, two types of credits. This is non-revolving credit, which is 95% of non-revolving credit is student loans and auto loans. You can see how they have been growing like crazy. So student loans and auto loans are surging. Why? Because both are subsidized. One by the US federal government, the other one by the auto manufacturers. So this is the deal. Americans are going back to college, and they are doing it on a car. That's it. Credit card lending is nowhere to be found. Very, very weak. Remember, credit card lending dropped by $7 billion on average per month during 27 consecutive months. And it's still very, very weak. No recovery of credit card lending, which was the lifesaver for the US consumer. So, since we are not consuming, we are not taking credit, we are paying it back, debt as a percentage of personal disposable income has gone from 125% to 102%. Still very high, but that is not the most important. This is the most important. Debt service ratio is at almost all-time low. Debt service ratio is how much do we have to pay for that debt every month from our pockets. And that amount is almost at an all-time low. Every time that we have hit 10.5% of personal disposable income, we have started back to borrow. So there is a chance that we might do the same thing again during the next several quarters. And that could put the consumer a little bit stronger than what we have today. Consumer confidence is very weak. Savings rate went down very fast during before the recession. Then during the recession it went up. And now it has gone down to, I mean, December was very strong, 6.5%, but that's because everybody paid bonuses bonuses in advance of the increasing taxes, right? So that's why savings was so, I mean, personal income was very, very strong, personal consumption was weak, and then that's why personal savings grew by 6.5%. So, but look at this, This is personal savings rate, which I call the personal hoarding rate, because in order to save, you have to get something back, and we don't get anything because interest rates on savings is 0. So this is hoarding. Yes? But look at this. When do you say that savings start to go down? More or less. What year? Maybe 85, 86. Yes? When do you say that debt as a percentage of personal disposable income starts to go up? And this is mortgage debt, because if we separate consumer and mortgage debt here, mortgage debt remains fixed at 20% during the whole 50 years. 53 years. So the only thing that we have been doing is buying homes or financing our homes with our savings or investing in homes. So, anyway. Interest rates, all-time low, but who cares? Nobody's buying. What do we have for this year again? 1.7% for GDP, compared to 2.2% for last year, so a little bit lower because of the sequestration and the increasing payroll taxes. All that is going to affect the economy, the consumer side. You know, sequestration, I know that you want to hear about sequestration. Sequestration, I had a friend that this morning wrote, why are we making so much noise about sequestration? It's $85 billion, it's 2.3% of total government expenditures this year. But there's a catch. There are some states that are going to be affected much more than other states. And this is one of those states. So it is not equal, homogeneous across the country, and that is a big issue for many people in regional economies. For next year, we have 2.1%, so overall 1.5% to 2% growth for the foreseeable future until the economy is in a better footing, which the Federal Reserve right now thinks that it's going to be by the first half of 2015. And then they will be able to increase interest rates, and the economy will not drop back. But that is what I have for you today. As a very good friend of mine always says, after I explain something to him, he says, Eugenio, thank you very much for your explanation. I am still confused, but at a high level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eugenio, for the whole presentation. We really appreciate the fact that you traveled from your family to Las Cruces to help us today. Now I would like the opportunity to introduce NMSU's resident expert, Dr. Jim Peach. Dr. Peach is a Regents Professor of Economics and International Business at New Mexico State University, where he's actually been a member of faculty since 1980. Congratulations, Dr. Peach. His research interests include macroeconomics, policy, energy, economic development, income distribution, and demography. His research has also been focused in the U.S.-Mexico economic relations and the development of the U.S.-Mexico border. Dr. Peach is widely published and makes many presentations on the state of the economy. He's had numerous awards, including an award of Outstanding Funded Research and an award of Teaching Excellence. Please welcome Dr. Jim Peach.
Thank you. I'll send you the check for that introduction. This is great fun. This is the second year we've done this. I'd like to thank Dean Carruthers for arranging all of this at Wells Fargo. Good fun. And I really hope that you listened carefully to my friend and colleague, Dr. Aleman. They do a really good job of forecasting at Wells Fargo. I read their stuff all the time. And my hat is off to you. And actually, I can do better than that. I brought you the hat. This one happens to be new, but I thought he looked good. He's going to give a talk in El Paso tomorrow with an NMSU hat on. And I should thank the Dean's office for that hat as well. I stole it. I'm going to talk mainly about the New Mexico economy. Is this mic okay? Is that all right? But I'm going to start off with a few comments about the national economy. Not to contradict anything that was just said. A little bit different perspective on some issues. The first item up here, Dr. Aleman mentioned as well, the costs of the Great Recession were huge. And I'll show you some of that in a little bit. Also unnecessary. We know how to fix this stuff. We really know how to fix it. This wasn't the consequence of a natural disaster that destroyed all of our infrastructure or capacity to produce. It wasn't because a war devastated the American economy. We got into this mess because of policy. Policy in both the public and private sectors. There's a lot of blame to go around. I'm an optimist, but I want to show you some things that are not too pretty. We have some policy choices in front of us. Do we really want Japanese-style growth over the next couple of years? The deficit and the debt problem, everybody talks about it. The fiscal cliff, sequestration. Let's get over it. Get over it. That's the easiest thing in the world to fix. We know how to do that. My last little quote up here. I saw Alan Simpson and Erskine Bowles on TV the other day, and I wanted to say this, but it's much better if you can quote a former Republican senator from Wyoming. And sequestration is stupid policy. Let's get over all that stuff. So what did the Great Recession cost us? Here it is right here so far. The red line is a trend line for the last 60 years of real GDP. That blue shaded area up here, that's what we lost in the 5 years from 08 through 13. It's about $6.6 trillion. Now, that's like, in 2005 dollars, by the way. That's like shutting down the U.S. economy for 6 months. Shutting it down completely for 6 months. Wasted output, just horrible stuff. We know how to fix that. Employment. We're still down 3.2 million jobs from where we were in December '07. At current rates, 150, 160,000 a month. It'll be 2015 before we have as many jobs as we did in December '07 when the recession started. And you know what? That wasn't very many more jobs than we had in 1999. This is not a new deal. Okay. Now we do this. There we go. Okay. And I round up the usual suspects on forecasts of real GDP growth. The Congressional Budget Office, 1.4% for 2013. The Fed Survey of Economists, 1.9. The Conference Board at 1.6. The Mortgage Bankers Association at 1.8. 1.7, and I pulled that off your newsletters. It's a horrible thing. Not that they're wrong. I tend to agree very much with Dr. Aliman. Somewhere between 1.5% and 2% for the year. That's a pretty good forecast given all of the logic of the situation. This is a 2% gain. When Ernie Banks used to come into a baseball game and say, let's play 2, he did not mean 2% real GDP growth. That's not a game that I want to play. We need twice this to fix the labor market. Twice that much. And it really affects New Mexico. I want to show you Japanese-style growth. The green line up here is the average percent change in real GDP in Japan during the 1980s, 4.5%. The blue line is what it is from 1992 through 2012. The red line is the average during that last 20-year period, actually 21 years. We don't want to play that game. We don't have to. That's a policy choice. It is. We can all tell you how to get out of that. Okay. Now, we're fixated on debt and deficit. I don't often quote Alan Greenspan. I used to tell my students when he was chair of the Fed, he was the best comedian since Jack Finney in America. And I could convince them that I was correct about that. But every now and then I appeal ceremonially to higher authority. Listen to this. A government cannot become insolvent with respect to obligations in its own currency. Can't happen. It cannot happen. Okay. All of this stuff, unsustainable deficits, unsustainable debt. Listen to Alan. I'm a conservative guy here. You cannot go bankrupt. That's not going to happen. Okay. Oh, we all know what the state question is. Red or green? We've still got the best green chili in the world. I needed to tell you something good about the New Mexico economy this afternoon. And by the way, production's up a little bit this year, I think 9,300 acres, as opposed to 8,500 the year before. That's a good thing. It's a tiny fraction of the economy, but red or green, we're tending towards the red side. We really are in the state. And let me kind of illustrate that with some slides here and some discussion, then we can open it up. An awful lot of what happens in New Mexico depends on what happens with the national economy. And you just heard about the national economy. 1.7% real GDP growth, that's not much. Why do we depend on the national economy so much? Think of the things that are produced in New Mexico and where we sell those things. Oil and gas, potash, copper, chips from Intel. Those are markets that are national and international. When the national economy does well, we can do well in this state on those things. When it does poorly, we cannot. Federal spending. We're heavily dependent on federal spending. I'm going to show you some stuff. Oil and gas, that's kind of a mixed story. We've got relatively stable and high oil prices. 93 bucks a barrel for West Texas Intermediate this morning. Dropped a couple of bucks from yesterday. Terrible natural gas prices. 3.25 for 1,000 cubic feet. Kind of offsets each other. And we don't have any strategy to overcome any of this. The legislature is in session. That's always a dangerous thing. It is great fun if you want to go up and listen to them at the Roundhouse. Some people have been there. It really is. But the issues are, this year, fairly simple. As always, it is House Bill 2. That's the state budget. And I'll talk about that in a second. Capital outlays should be important, but what they pass in terms of capital outlays this year will not affect construction employment this year. Takes a while once they do the capital outlay bill to get bonds sold and get things started. Architects, and, they move at a geologic pace on some of this stuff. Minimum wage legislation. There's legislation in the state legislature to raise New Mexico's minimum wage. Lots of publicity about it. I think it's a non-issue. I really do. That's not going to, whether they do it or don't do it, I prefer that they do it, but it's a non-issue. Not many people really work at the minimum wage. We have House Bill 182 to lower the corporate income tax in New Mexico. We currently have a higher corporate income tax than the surrounding states. And the administration thinks, and that it might be useful to lower that in terms of attracting companies here. I wish we'd get rid of it altogether. Now, for those of you who know me, that may be a surprising statement, but I wish we'd just get rid of it. It is a small portion of the state budget, 4 or 5% of state revenue every year. We spend a lot of time arguing about it. If we get rid of the corporate income tax and get rid of the tax expenditures to subsidize industries to come to New Mexico at the same time, it'd almost be a wash, and we can move on to some more important things. Okay, now, I want to start off with the long run. Are we making progress? This is New Mexico personal income per person as a percent of the national average. And it goes back almost to Dr. Aliman's birthday. I picked that in particular I won't tell you my birthday, but I'm just a kid. We've been in a fairly narrow range of 76 to 82% of the national average for as long as we've had data like this. We need to do something a little bit different to bust out of that. We really do. Now, here's a different view of per capita income in the state. It's the percent change annually in per capita personal income in New Mexico and in the U.S. And have a look at that. You don't need a fancy econometric model to tell what's going on here. If I had not labeled those two lines, it really wouldn't matter. When the U.S. does well, New Mexico does well. When the U.S. is in the tank, sorry, we're in the tank too. 1.7% real GDP growth is not going to produce much here. I'll give you some numbers at the end of my talk about where I think it'll be this year, but it really does depend in large part on what happens in the national economy. Okay. What do they know in Philadelphia? Not much. They don't even play baseball up there. Anymore. The Philadelphia Federal Reserve Bank, though, does put out economic business cycle indicators for each of the 50 states. And whether or not that's your favorite methodology or not, that's a pretty good picture of what's been happening in New Mexico over the last several years. We had something of a boom. The peak in this, by the way, is in March or April of '08, 3 or 4 months behind the peak in the national economy. And then we went down, and we've been flatlined. And that's what the recovery in New Mexico kind of looks like. And it doesn't matter what indicator you pick there. That's kind of where we are. Sad thing is, they put out a leading index. A leading index. And for the last several quarters, this is a 6-month leading index. We've been flopping around between -1% and +1%. Not a pretty picture. Just not a pretty picture. So maybe they don't know anything about New Mexico and Philadelphia. Here's another one from a forecasting service that I get. My friends up there are a bit more optimistic about New Mexico. That small increase in the January leading indicator for the state of New Mexico, but essentially it's 0 over the next 6 months. Okay, now look at employment for a minute. And again, I superimpose the U.S. and New Mexico up here. New Mexico is not recovering in terms of employment. The U.S. has been going up a bit. We've had 160,000, 170,000 jobs a month. New Mexico has been flat. We've lost 50,000 jobs, 48,000, since the start of the recession. And we even lost jobs last year in 2012, about 3,000 jobs statewide. We are not headed in the same direction that the national economy is. Not right now. By sector, you always want to look for a leading sector to get you out of it. This is not every sector. Makes the graph too crowded. We lost 48,000 jobs. These over here, with the exception of healthcare services, are a loss of 51,000 jobs. Construction, down 17,000 since the start of the recession. Manufacturing, down 6,000. And that's a lot of manufacturing jobs in New Mexico. Government, down 7,000. And most of that state and local. It really is. Wholesale trade, retail trade, combined are down about 9,000. Professional and business services, about 12,000. The only growth, education and healthcare services. And during 2012, the rate of increase of that sector dropped in New Mexico considerably. That's a sad story. I'm going to cheer you up in a little bit. Don't worry about that. Here's another view of construction and manufacturing. We've had some indications that housing in Albuquerque may be showing signs of life. Some indications that housing is showing signs of life here, but you certainly can't tell it from construction employment, manufacturing employment. We're just not picking up anything. Single-family housing starts by building permits in New Mexico. We're not out of it yet. We're just not out of it yet. Okay. The public sector in New Mexico. How am I doing on time? I've got 3 more minutes. I can do it. 5? Oh, that's good. We've got almost 25% of total employment in the state that is government employment. And it's actually much larger than that because we have a lot of people who work for private companies who are under direct contract with federal government agencies. We've got NASA and White Sands out here. We've got all kinds of stuff in Los Alamos and Sandia. And so the impact is a lot more. I really am an optimist, but that government sector, that's not a growth sector. I don't care what kind of political perspective you might have on the sequester, the fiscal cliff, or any of the other stuff. Government is not likely to lead us out of this economy in New Mexico. In fact, it could get pretty nasty if we really have the sequester. State budget. It's not going to happen either. I wanted to show you this. FY14 starts in New Mexico on July 1 of this year. FY14's budget is what the legislature is working on right now. It'll be about $5.88 billion, somewhat smaller than we had in FY08, which started July 1, 2007. It's not a growth industry. In real terms, if we adjust it for inflation, we're way down on the state budget. That does not suggest a lot of rehiring of government workers in the state or a stimulus for the state. Now, I borrowed this right out of the Wells Fargo newsletter. Now, but they kind of also borrowed it. It's the same map that's at the Pew Center. An interesting calculation. The percent of gross domestic product in 2010 that can be attributed to the federal government, but it's only a portion of federal government expenditures. It is only procurement and wages and salaries. If you included in New Mexico retirement payments, disability payments, and all of the other direct payments to individuals, this number is about 36% for New Mexico out of GDP. As it is, 13%, we're one of the higher ones, behind Alaska and a few states right around Washington, D.C. If the sequester really happens, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt in New Mexico. We do about $150 million a year in federally funded research on this campus. It's going to hurt right here on this campus if the sequester goes into effect. We get a pretty good rate of return in New Mexico on government expenditures. This is FY11, $25 billion in expenditures from the feds. We pay about $6 billion in taxes. The arithmetic's pretty easy. We get about $4 federal dollars in the state for each dollar that we pay in taxes. That's a pretty good business proposition. Okay. I've got to give you some good news and some bad news. Oil prices. Oil prices. We've been sitting pretty well on oil prices. And oil production in the state in the last 4 or 5 years, like it has in a lot of places in the United States, has gone way up. We used to produce on average about 60 million barrels of oil a year. We're now producing 80. That's a real hefty increase. Natural gas, the price has been low because every place, almost every place in the continental U.S. where you poke a hole in the ground, you can find natural gas. It's just everywhere. So the supply has increased, the price is low, and our production in New Mexico has fallen. What does that mean? Well, it means the eastern side of the state, think Hobbs, think Eddy County, Lee County, doing pretty well, and the northwestern part of the state where we produce a lot of natural gas, and they've held off on drilling, not doing so well. Need to show you kind of what happens here. Oil and gas is nice for New Mexico's economy. This is oil prices and the number of active rigs in the state. If you shifted that just a little bit, they're almost the same graph, just almost the same graph. When oil prices go up, we get more drilling activity. It's a really, really important deal. Some people will tell you that New Mexico's pit rules are discouraging drilling in the state. I don't buy that for an instant. The pit rule says that you've got to take care of the produced water from an oil well or a gas well. It adds about $100,000 per well to the cost of drilling a well. Average cost of drilling a well is $6 or $7 million. $100,000, that's not even a decimal point there. And it's not nearly as important as a $5 change in the price of oil. Just not at all. But, so we've got one good thing going here. We've got oil prices. You want a prediction on oil prices? Now, go somewhere else. I'm not doing it. What I tell people is that I know too much. Do that. In July '08, when West Texas Intermediate hit $147, I watched Boone Pickens. I'll quit. You're going to scare me off. Boone Pickens on TV. Boone Pickens has been in the oil industry about 60 years, knows a lot about the business. He said by December we're going to have $200 oil. And by December we had $40 oil. So Boone, who knows a whole lot, missed that by about $160 a barrel. And I can't beat Boone at that game. I just can't do it. I don't know where oil prices are going. Really, really don't. Okay, you want a New Mexico forecast? I'll give you one. Non-farm employment this year, 0 to 1%. Maybe 1% if the sequester stuff gets settled. Closer to 0 if it doesn't. Total personal income up about 3 or 4% in nominal terms and dollar terms. That's been about the average for a long time. New Mexico GDP also up, largely because of oil and gas. When will we get the number of jobs that we had when the recession started in early '08? If we were to grow at 1% a year, that's about 8,000 jobs a year. That's 6 years from now. That's 2019. 1% a year will look real nice right now. And so we will have gone more than a decade, if this is the scenario, with no job increases in New Mexico. That's a sad thing, but I've got one really good forecast for you. The Cubs are going to win the World Series this year. I have been showing this chart since 1908.
Big round of applause for Dr. Jim Peace and Dr. Oliver.
We're going to turn these microphones off just now, but Dr. Peach is a big Cubs fan, and here one was 2 or 3 years ago, you made the comment that any team can have a bad century.
That's right. And in the economy as well.
The Cubs have certainly done that. We're going to be able to take just a couple of quick questions. You need to come to the microphones to ask those questions, and because we're trying to record this. So who would like to ask the first question? I got one back here. Yes, sir. Go right up there and ask the question.
My name is Mikola Novak. I'm from College of Business. I have a question to Dr. Aleman. Can you tell a little bit more and share your opinion a little bit more about competitive advantage of United States compared to China? You shared a little bit regarding this manufacturing capabilities. However, it's not about labor in China. It's about their flexibility and being agile to customers and being flexible to run any manufacturing you want within days compared to months in the United States, So that's why most of the new ventures are kind of moving toward China. So, just in terms of economic outlook, can you just share a little bit more about your understanding of how United States will compete with emerging and fast-growing countries like China? Thank you.
So again, we have been competing with the rest of the world for the last 220 years, 30 years, and we will continue to compete with them. I have mine.
Okay, good.
You don't hear mine? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes. Yes. No. Yes. 1, 2, 3. This doesn't work.
In other words, he doesn't know the answer.
So we are a very competitive economy. We are one of the most competitive economies in productive economies in the world. Today's GDP is larger than before the recession, with 4 million workers less. So we are going to continue to go through this path, and our unemployment rate is not a big issue because, it's not a big issue when we don't have a recession. So, at the political level, we have to fix, or we have to tell the Chinese to get a grip of their currency and not compete against us with an overvalued currency. But we are doing the same thing to other countries of the world. We have been printing money like crazy, and the US dollar has depreciated by 40% versus the euro in the last 12 years. So we have gained competitiveness versus the rest of the world in terms of currency. The Chinese are a very cheap economy, but they are not the most efficient economy. This is the same thing. If you buy an iPhone, it costs you, without the contract from the thieves of the companies that sell the wireless system, it costs you $600. How much stays in China? $60. The rest goes to Silicon Valley, and to India, and to all the countries that contribute to that. So, we are going to continue to be the best economy in the world, and we have to continue to compete with the rest of the world as we have been doing for the last 200 years. The biggest difference today is that it goes out in the TV and you hear about it. But I would not be that concerned that we are losing. We are going to lose against China anyway because there are too many people. But we are still the most efficient and most productive.
Dr. Aleman, we're good.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that, Chris.
Chris Harris in the College of Business. This is for Dr. Aleman, but I won't ask him until you put the hat on.
It didn't fit. It's just my big head.
My question is that M&A activity, merger and acquisition activity, hit a record high since the recession. So far this quarter, we're not even through the quarter yet. Do you think that's an indication of the economy coming back, and does this mean that corporations are finally putting their cash reserves to work?
I think so. Well, I can, oh, I'm broken. There we go. I can do it, yes. So, I'm being taken. This is not fair.
You can return that and get your money back.
Is this made in China? So you see how competitive they are. Yes, I think that with today's interest rates, it's any project that you have today will probably be, if we are not assuming a depression in the next 20 years, with today's interest rate, anybody that invests today is going to have a rate of return that is very, very interesting. If, of course, we don't go into a depression. So I think that this increase in mergers and acquisitions is a good sign for the U.S. economy. And the biggest issue is that the U.S. firms have a humongous balance sheet, and it is still putting pressure on interest rate. And that shows that they are still very, very risk averse. They are still fearing that what is coming to them is not positive, and we still have a long way to go to get rid of all this money, and hopefully it will happen.
Dr. Beach, did you
No,
have a comment?
I agree. But didn't it strike anybody as a little bit odd a couple of weeks ago, last week actually, when United and American Airlines said they were going to merge, and that was an $11 billion deal. And then almost the next morning, Heinz Ketchup was purchased for $23 billion. Twice as much as the airlines. The ketchup, 23 billion. Airplanes, 11. There's something.
You need to look at the profit margin.
Oh, I do know the financials work, but that's odd.
Let me ask Dr. Beach while he's up here, and then Pat's going to ask a question, then we're going to have to terminate. You said in your speech, we know how to fix this. You said that several times.
You betcha.
In a nutshell, give me the soundbite and tell us
The stimulus in 09 was too small. We have lots of evidence from lots of financial crises around the world. It should have been twice as big. It should have all been directed to spending and not tax cuts so that Pat Lamb could readjust his balance sheet.
Okay, Pat, we're going to take a question from you, and then we're going to have to sign off. I want Bernie to come up and say something.
Okay, this is for you, Dr. Peach. You talk about the Mexico economy. We've always had kind of the safety net insulation of government spending, which has kind of kept us solid. That's going away. Oil and gas seems to be very volatile. What do you think the best hope is for New Mexico's economy? What particular industry direction do you think it would take to really get us where we're a lot more stable?
I think what we have to do is create the best trained, best educated workforce, that our schools and workforce training have to be the envy of the surrounding states. You cannot attract high-tech firms here and offer them high school dropouts. It is that simple. We go begging for a firm to relocate here from New Jersey. That's fine. I applaud those efforts if it works. At the macro level, that's a zero-sum game. But if we get one in New Mexico, that's fine. That's cool. But that isn't going to be the trick. We need to be able to offer a 21st century workforce. Simple as that.
We can say hallelujah to that one. I believe that very much. Now I'm going to ask Brennan to make a comment, but before I ask Brennan, it has been a wonderful kind of seminar for you all, and I hope you appreciate it. The hat was actually made in China, but it's 100% cotton, and that was probably from the Mesilla Valley.
I have a Cubs hat made in the USA.
Okay, I'm going to ask Bernard Holtzman to kind of close it, but I do want to thank you all for coming and your attention. But most of all, I want to thank Wells Fargo for being such good partners with the College of Business and New Mexico State University and doing this. And again, two great economists who not only are entertaining, but we learned a whole lot today. Bernard?
Thank you, Dr. Carruthers, Dean Carruthers. Let me tell you what, guys. Very interesting, both of you. We had a good time with you today, and I'm hoping that everybody here did learn something, and it might be able to even help you look forward into 2013. The partnership that Wells Fargo has with the Business College and New Mexico State is just phenomenal. And AT, hats off to you, girl, and to Judy, and to all the people from Wells Fargo who are here. We couldn't do it without you, but again, thank you all for coming. And Dr. Aleman, Dr. Peach, wait till next year.
Thank you very much. Have a good night. Hope you enjoy it.